You're listening to Think About It with Pastor Peter Carbless.
Welcome to today's episode of Think About It with Pastor Peter Carbless. Peter, welcome back again.
It's great to be here.
Now, we were diving deep last episode into the Holy Spirit and the person of the Holy Spirit and who he is and why he is. Why did Jesus say, because this is something I've always looked at and thought seems a bit strange. Jesus said, it's better that I go that the Holy Spirit may come. I put myself in the disciples' shoes and say, hang on, it's really cool having you next to us here where we can ask questions that, why is it better for you to go away and then this Holy Spirit who we can't see or can't touch to come?
That's a really good question, and I don't expect that my answer is going to be the final answer on some of these very big questions. But I'll tell you how I've come to think about that. And as I have over the years done a lot of reflecting on the nature of the promise of the New Covenant or New Testament, which is, I will write my laws on your mind and on your heart, and I'll be your God and you'll be my people. What that really is the greatest promise that God will take us as human beings and cause us to come into full conformity with what he created us for in the beginning. That is to be perfect reflections of his image and likeness. And that requires a deep inner work of the transformation of our character, formation of virtue, if you want to put it in more formal terms. And the whole story going from Abraham through Moses, as God progressively worked from one covenant to another to the final fulfillment of the new covenant, shows that God is saying, look, I really, there's this way of life, this way of being that I want you to have, but I want to make it not something imposed on you. I want it to be something that is actually you, and it's identified with you. In that sense, when Jesus came, he came as the perfect human being. And I often say, sometimes humorously, but actually I'm quite serious about it when you think about it. If Jesus is the perfect human being, then that's what human is. So anything less than that is a form of subhuman. So when we say that I am not yet fully in the likeness of Christ, then with joy I can acknowledge and say, yes, I'm still a bit subhuman, but he is fulfilling my humanity by forming his character in me through the work of the Holy Spirit. So that's the New Testament promise, this incredible, beautiful transformation to make us the kind of people who would naturally deliver on things like the Ten Commandments. So we would naturally honour our parents. We wouldn't steal. We couldn't commit adultery. We could not bear false witness against each other. We don't covet. We're appreciative. We want to be that kind of person. Everybody says, yeah, that's the kind of person I want to be. The Holy Spirit wants to form that. Jesus was fully that.
So it's where our goodness becomes an issue of character, not an issue of behaviour.
Yes, it's actually the promise of becoming the person you want to be, rather than being afraid that you're going to get into trouble for not doing the right thing. God is saying, look, I'm not here to punish you for not doing the right thing. I'm helping you to be the right thing. And Jesus came as the perfect reflection of that. Now, when we read the Gospels, and we read all those things, people were spectators to that. They were incredibly awestruck by it. They were attracted to it. They wanted it. But the greatest thing was Jesus says, not only are you going to have me forever around, but I'm going to make you so like me. I'm going to make you not just people who get to be my fans. I'm going to transform you into my likeness. I'm going to give you my abilities, but each of you with your own personality. Now, to do that, there's a sense in which he had to get out of the way. Otherwise, we keep being spectators. He wants us to take the strain.
He wants us all in.
Yeah, he wants us all in. And so he said, listen, I've got to tell you something. How would you like what makes me come and help you to be you, right? And so that Spirit's been poured. And so we face the challenges and the difficulties and the problems of life, and many of which come from our own turning our back to the light and living in our shadows rather than in the light. That means we've got to engage with that. And now, so in that sense, so Jesus had to get out of the way in order for the work he really wanted to, the greatest promise he could give us was that transformation, right, for that to happen. The other thing, though, is that when he went away, it's interesting that when you take a look at the way the apostles reflected on it, they've never thought of him as having left them. They knew he was coming back in glory in a special thing, but they saw that he had actually gone. You read Philippians, where it speaks about that he who had the mind of God didn't count himself equal to be with God. Follow that right through. It ends up with the exciting fact that he's now seated at the right hand of the Father. He's enthroned in heaven. He's the one in charge. And so they realize that Jesus has not gone into some kind of spiritual green room waiting for his turn to get back on stage. No, he is on the throne. He's not on stage. He's on the throne. He's the one right now calling the shots. And because he's on the throne and his Spirit is here with us, proceeding from the Father into our lives, that is where the realization is that we are in some ways, the greatest time, even though, as Dickens said, we're in the best of times and the worst of times. We can take a hold of the reality of the Spirit and face the challenges and the difficulties and the absurdities and the contradictions of life, knowing that the Spirit of God is the only thing that has substantive reality and everything else will pass. But Jesus is on the throne helping us to be what he created us and wants us to be. And to do that, he has to let us take the strain. The same way, if you like another metaphor, you'd say the coach doesn't play the game. The players have to be the ones who get out there and get tackled, but the coach helps direct the shots.
So, in the sense that Jesus said, I go so that he may come, but we've already reflected on the fact that the Holy Spirit was active in the Old Testament, right from the first act of creation. So the Holy Spirit was here, but then Jesus is saying, but he's going to come. So is it a different sense of, like what happened at Pentecost and all that? Is it a different level of the Spirit operating or presence on the planet?
Yeah, I think it's like he's just doing another job.
Right.
He's always been there, and he's always been doing what he could do, but now he's doing a different work because the covenant has changed, right? The covenant, when that new covenant was inaugurated, he began the work of transforming our minds and hearts. Up until that time, he might have been revealing the truth of God to people. He might have been helping them see it. He might have been working in the flow of history, right? He might have been inspiring the prophets. He's always been upholding creation so that something actually exists, because the Holy Spirit didn't just create the world and then retire. No, God is constantly holding the world in existence. But at the time of the new covenant, the one who was always present, if you like, moved into a new role and added another string to his bow, if you like, right? And that string is the new covenant string, which is the transformation of mind and heart, if you like, filling in the final piece in causing those who are created to be in God's image and likeness to be totally fulfilled and perfected in God's image and likeness.
So is it that prior to the release of the Holy Spirit after Jesus, that while the Holy Spirit was certainly there and influencing and inspiring and leading and operating, he wasn't actually living in as he does now?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Holy Spirit, if you look at sort of classical theology, and I agree with this, that all of God is always everywhere present in every location. So he's always been present, but he's not been doing the internal work in the same way as the new covenant stipulates. The new covenant came into being at that day, on the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit was poured out. The new covenant comes into being because the Holy Spirit was poured out to do the transforming work, which is beautifully articulated by the prophet Ezekiel. A new heart I'll give you, a new spirit I'll put within you, and I'll put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my ways. So it's when that work began, and because it's the putting of our spirit in us to cause us to walk in his ways, that we use the word indwelling for that. Now, the unfortunate thing about using that word, it's a beautiful word, it's a true word, and it's one we must continue to use, but everything's always, if you get it slightly wrong, can muck you up. That didn't mean he wasn't present before. There was a sense in which he was always indwelling, but he's now indwelling in a new way, in a new and living way.
Okay, so I get that, and a lot of that's to do with us allowing him to operate. We still have our free will, so we can still suppress or block the operation of the Holy Spirit within us, who in his transformative work on our character. So he's not there controlling, I guess is what I'm saying. He's there for our benefit, but not to take us over, if you like.
Absolutely, and in fact, he's there to form our will. Now, this is really quite fascinating. God created us to love him and for him to love us. Now, if we're created to be loving people, we're created so that a certain shape of our will is healthy for us. So it's not like free will is completely arbitrary. There's healthy and unhealthy forms of the will. I can choose to hate, I can choose to love. Either way I'm choosing. Now, if my desires tend toward hate, then I'd say I have some spiritual ill health that needs healing. It's ethically wrong too, but it's also unhealthy. As the healing work of God works within us, he causes us to become loving people. But loving people have a will toward others and an inclination toward others, which is healthy. But to form that, the Holy Spirit you cannot force will. If you force will, then you don't have will. And so the Holy Spirit is forming our desires, helping us develop healthy inclinations, healthy dispositions, healthy orientations of our lives that naturally respect parents, that naturally don't kill, that naturally don't commit adultery, that naturally don't steal. Right? So he's making us the kind of people for whom even choosing or wanting those things is foreign to us. But he cannot do it by coercing or forcing us or causing us to fear in the unhealthy sense of fear, because to do that, you're not forming the will, you're constraining the wrong will. And there's a difference between restraining and constraining an unhealthy will and actually having a healthy will that doesn't have to be restrained or constrained, because it wouldn't go there. It's not its nature.
I guess any of us who have parents have a natural understanding of what you're saying, because it's like we try to raise our children in a way that we form their character without breaking their spirit.
Yes.
You don't want to crush them and conform them and force them into a mold or into a direction. That's wrong. This is, you don't do that. You seek to give them understanding so that they make right choices.
Yes.
Rather than just sort of blind following of rules.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's sort of something we naturally do anyway as a parent, without comprehending maybe that's exactly what God's trying to do with us.
Well, there's also reflections, if you like, of the image of God, which is part of what human beings are. We can't not be what God made us to be, because he's the one who made us to be. And what is healthy for us will always be what God, according to the nature of God. And look at that, you're saying, well, our fatherhood works this way with our children. God reveals himself to us as our Father.
I just want to touch on, because it's an area that does come up, is we talk about the Holy Spirit dwelling within us. There's a very clear distinction between that and what we would see and we hear of in the world of people being possessed by evil spirits.
Well, you see, if you go back to the conversation we've just had, that becomes a really easy answer, you see, because where you have an evil spirit possession, it actually where something takes over your will and it constrains and restrains your will so that you are forced into doing, if you look at the way people fantasize it, they're completely taken over by this demon and there is nothing they can do about it, and it's going to work its way in you and it's going to just use you as a vehicle to express its malevolence. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind. Now the point is, that's not what the Holy Spirit's doing. The Holy Spirit's not interested in taking us over and expressing his personality, right? And no matter how sweet and nice it is, what he's wanting to do is to cause us to have our personality formed as it was created to be, so that it becomes the truth of what liberation actually is. And he releases us from corrupting passions and corrupting desires and inclinations that pull our will in unhealthy ways. And the true liberty of God is we're freed from unhealthy passions and desires. The sad thing these days, we're living in a world in which the conception of liberty is that we're not free unless we're free for our unhealthy passions and desires, whereas God is saying, no, you're just going back into slavery to the unhealthy passions and desires. The Holy Spirit's going to do something greater. He's not going to suppress us or repress us. He's going to transform us so our desires and passions are formed in a different direction, and in the direction of health, love, grace, and in the direction that is expressed by the karpos, the fruit of the Spirit.
I guess it's the whole thing is God's will and his desire is for our good. He made us. He knows what works best, and that's what he's trying to bring to fruition.
Yes, it's not coercive, it's formative. It's life-giving, not controlling.
Peter, again, we've run out of time again. There's just so much in this on what we're unpacking and discussing. Love to come back next time, and let's unpack in next time a bit more of the charisma, the gifts, the operational gifts of the Spirit and that kind of thing. Let's dig more into that area in our next one. But for today, thanks again, and I hope everyone's really got food for thought after this.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Peter.
Rick.
Thanks.
Think About It with Pastor Peter Karblis is a production of rema.cc.